I implore all of those systematically disadvantaged to not take a negative way out. Imagine if your car breaks down and you are legally required to fix it perfectly, or you will be legally found at fault. Ignorance of auto mechanics is not a defense. If you are unable or unfit to fix it yourself, then you are required by law to prove unequivocally in the same dogmatic system that you are unable or not fit, against a professional trying to undermine that argument to seek advantage for the purpose of winning and assigning a fault against you. And the entire time that you try to work through this problem, a professional mechanic will be trying to undermine and misrepresent all of your efforts. Pulling wires off, pretending to help but steering you down the wrong path, increasing workload, trying to trick you into making a mistake, creating a false paper trail, misrepresenting your legitimate efforts to try to represent to others that you are doing it wrong. If you do not fix it perfectly, you will be legally found at fault and punished. We are seeing a recent round of court system reforms being advertised as more balanced sexually, more self-represented friendly, and making the court process more streamlined. Is this the truth? And what are the repercussions if it's not? I was at the local courthouse, and there is a whole revising of the types and styles of applications. Further, I have seen a push towards discouraging the self-represented from making applications. I had one registrar outrightly argue with me that only a lawyer could make an application for 5 minutes before another rather mouthy registrar admitted that I can. The procedural process and whether or not an imperfect application will be accepted is, however, being tightened up severely. The amount of information that a self-represented is expected to know just to have an application successfully accepted is being grown exponentially. I believe this to be intentional. What does this over-specialization of the court process mean to the self-represented and society at large? What are the implications on accessibility to the process? Ultimately, and most importantly, what are the implications for the children? If we look at how realistic it is for the average person to be able to navigate the system, we must consider the barriers for them. Self-represented litigants lack resources. There are court application fees and photocopying fees and jurisdictional requirements, travel, and time. This is the biggest. If you can't type and compile documents, then you need a secretary. If you can't understand the dogma of the system, then you need a lawyer. If you have a job and transportation, then you don't qualify for most aid, and if you don't have transportation and are between jobs, then you need to do a lot of travel to access resources. This is time-consuming if you are trying to hold on to that job or don't have a car to just pop over. We have seen during COVID what the interruption in accessibility has done to families and individuals. We can expect those results to continue to rise. Self-represented litigants often lack eloquence or corpse entity system skills and abilities. You must be able to type, file, and manage documents. You must be able to research and compile information. You must have literary prowess. You must be able to read jargon-laden documents and absorb the information therein. You must be able to compile large amounts of technical or specialized information and collate the ideas in your head to adapt them to your situation. And if you want any chance of participating, let alone winning, you must be able to express yourself within their industry's dogmatic ideology. The industry's response is, oh, well, you just. The system deliberately discriminates against and rewards those able to conduct themselves in that over-specialized way or those able or willing to abuse them. Technical ability neither makes you a better parent nor makes you a better person. The last round of changes makes that divide more pronounced. Self-represented litigants are usually at a place where they are unfit to represent themselves not only technically but also mentally. PTSD from situational abuse, separation anxiety, social pressures, increased burdens to fix the situation that are usually outside of the parent's normal skill set, and deadline constraints to accomplish any efforts at alleviating the abuse of the imposed situation. But the burden is entirely upon the most downtrodden or victimized to fix the situation and hold the other to account. They are required to represent themselves, have no recourse, or be found against. The system will argue that there are plenty of resources out there. Most are pretty useless to you. The barriers to access these resources are very high. Likewise, the time investment to navigate accessing those resources or even find out that you can't is high. Society must admit that there is a sexual bias towards the allocation of those resources that can only be justified with biased statistics. And it is getting worse with the new hyper-specialized protocols being implemented by the courts. State actors are also moving in this direction. So what do I fear for society as a repercussion and fallout? I expect that we will continue to see an increase in family court-assisted life endings. I expect that we will see a rise in extreme violent acts of those who become unwell due to systematic and societal deprivation of basic needs like access to family. Anxiety leads feelings of desperation and ultimately to bad decisions. Mental health will continue to decline among those who cannot navigate the system. Otherwise, good parents, and in many cases the best parents, will face overwhelming anxiety and stress causing mental deterioration. Compounding factors include disruption of their family unit and alienation from that unit perpetrated systematically by the other parent and their representation. We will continue to see a rise in single-parent households and a decrease in equality between households following family breakdown. This despite slick public relations campaigns to the public claiming that the monopoly solution is going to change this. By all appearances, they are doing the exact opposite with the primary concern of industry protectionism. They will most likely ultimately increase their own workload rather than decrease it. Their model isn't exactly novel. We see the same thing in every industry. Take your federal and state corps entities for an example. They push e-billing and procedural website self-solutions. If you can become an expert at navigating their sprawling, ever-changing monolithic websites, then you truly can self-serve almost any solution. Users are discouraged from using customer service experts through many barriers put in place to push them towards self-solution. Not being able to navigate the website, absorb the terminology, or other problems leads to a call-in. A call-in leads to a menu with large useless recordings and tree roots that all tell you to use the website while you try to find the tree root that gets you a person who knows something that can help you. Family court is becoming this without the helpful person at the end of the ordeal and you being found at fault for not getting to the solution by yourself. After all, why didn't you just? But the hyper-specialization and learning curve to do so is unrealistic. The average person simply doesn't have the time of necessarily the aptitude to become an expert in your corpse entity's dogmatic process. The requirement of which is a barrier to justice. It's in the best interests of the children, right? No, it's not. The industry has come to be its own master. People who work in it with the intent to help families and children are fooled. The public en masse are fooled. I predict in 10 years things will continue to become worse with the current direction of reforms. So what is your answer? You're just complaining about things. You don't have a solution. For starters, we need to lower the specialization requirements to navigate the system and increase accessibility. We need to recognize that the separated parent leaving a conflict is damaged and generally not able to represent themselves by default. Why do you think that the first part of the formula a lawyer tells you when you are going to leave a relationship is get control of the kids and get control of all of the money? They are saying take away the emotional stability of the other and their access to resources through parental alienation from their children and their ability to access the system, as it is financially barriered. The only alternative to the financial barrier is time and specialization. There simply isn't enough time in a day to hold down all of your pre-existing responsibilities and create the new skills needed while needing to begin using the skills that you do not possess. Accessing all of those resources that they will push you toward and brag about, most you won't qualify for, will require even more time to ferret out if they are even of use to you. Spoiler, unless you're rock bottom, most aren't. And let's talk about rock bottom. The system's answer is a winner-loser answer. The winner is pushed up through accessibility to tools that are almost always misused, at least a little, through coaching and training by their representation to push the other down. Measures that can help include removing the protections allotted to judges and lawyers in family court that do not exist in criminal court. One of the worst loopholes in civil court is the difference in appeals between criminal and civil court. In civil court, you cannot appeal based on a mistaken fact. Lawyers routinely orally repeat misinformation over and over in a conditioning attempt to get the wrong fact to stick in the judge's head. Even if they are corrected, they simply say that they have misspoke and continue to try to repeat the same fact wrong. Over and over. Also, any judge that wants to shift a case can easily get a legally sound judgment with the wrong facts. What about the kids? The system is failing to recognize that it has been found that equal access to both parents is the only statistically significant predictor of lifelong child success. The current attempts by the court system will lead to increased failures, which will be covered up and spun to the detriment of all. Society has bias problems. These problems are being stereotyped and politicized by the very people claiming to be pro-diversity, inclusion, and equality. Hyperspecialization of interest groups that have to justify taking on the sellout template of the corpse entity's success just to get enough resources to try to do some good as spin-off. But selling out so many needed hard no's in the process as to become impotent or corrupted. And it's getting worse as it all gets bigger and more consolidated. If the automobile analogy is a good indication, then the system's assignment of all responsibility being upon the victimized to prove that legally, hold lawyers and judges to account, without tools, and otherwise navigate the system while handicapped, and then we see that the downside in family court can appear to be a gigantic catch-22 for whichever side is disadvantaged first and then continually. We are actively curated against banding together in any other way than to throw ourselves into the system and clog it until they either truly reform or expose that the emperor has no clothes. If the state wants to be the patented monopoly solution, then they need to accept the responsibility and implications of that without hiding behind dogmatic procedural shields. If they own the process, it can be bent to their will. Yet, their primary interest seems to be to bend it towards self-protection ahead of public service. If the only protest that you have is to be there in the system for them to deal with for the next 20 years, then that is what you need to do. One more statistic in a book doesn't get their attention. One more statistic filling their offices and hallways does. Apply, apply, apply to every agency, to every resource, flood them with clients. Fill the courts, fill the jails, fill the system. Don't take the negative way out that lets them point at you and say, "See, we were right," so we can sleep at night easily for not helping you. Tell your story no matter what happens. People need to not sleep at night because there is a severe problem in society that is decaying the family unit and destroying children.